It is 11:30. You know what that means. It's time to dive headfirst into all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. More of you are making this your home for unbiased political news every night. It's a show where you can really just throw that phone aside and get out of that social media echo chamber for some straight facts. That is, if you're watching the show on your phone. Don't throw the phone out. Keep watching. The next year and change is about to be huge for Michigan politics. The Detroit mayoral race, the gubernatorial election, and we'll elect a new senator, just to name a few. We're going inside these key races with Sam Robinson and Malachi Barrett in about 20 minutes. And we're diving into the Medicaid cuts on the table in the U.S. House. A closer look at the impact they could have. Plus, we're taking your questions about the issue to an expert. You know, those cut concerns sparked by the so-called Big Beautiful Bill that was introduced by the House Ways and Means Committee. There's a lot in it, so it's time for a quick deep dive. For starters, it would basically extend those 2017 tax cuts Congress approved and President Trump signed during his first term, but it would also boost the standard deduction, child tax credit, and estate tax exemption. There would also be new tax breaks on tipped wages, overtime pay, Social Security benefits, and also auto loans as well. You'll remember, those were promises the president made during his campaign. But it would also increase the state and local tax deduction, also known as SALT, to $30,000 for couples. Private universities would be slapped with an endowment tax as much as 21% in this bill, and it would terminate the tax-exempt status of groups the State Department claims supports terrorists. Now, advocates warn that's a way to punish groups at odds with the Trump administration. But here's where the major concerns come in. That $4.5 trillion in tax cuts would partially be covered by this $880 billion in cuts, primarily to Medicaid. That program provides health insurance for low-income people, regardless of their age. Republicans claim it's rooting out what they call waste, fraud, and abuse, a catchphrase of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. But the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, estimates it would lower the number of people with health care by 8.6 million over the next decade. And Democrats, well, they're pushing back hard.
4% of Americans don't like what the Democrats are proposing.
The bill is as toxic as we all feared.
So we're going to have 5 million Americans without health insurance, and we're going to have $7 trillion over the next decade of more debt.
You're seeing policies that Trump and the Republicans are bringing forth with tax breaks for billionaires and cuts to Medicaid.
They claim there's not going to be cuts. They claim they're taking out waste, fraud, and abuse.
No.
I understand what you're saying, right. But that's what they say.
It's in the eyes of the beholder with waste, fraud. Look, you don't cut $800 billion without really devastating Medicaid, attacking Social Security, so that seniors, disabled seniors, are going to have a hard time getting the program.
What's not clear tonight is what will happen if the bill reaches the Senate. You see, a key Republican, Senator Josh Hawley, wrote in the New York Times that cutting health care to pay for tax breaks is, quote, morally wrong and politically suicidal, adding the GOP needs to ignore calls to cut Medicaid. President Trump kicking off the Middle East trip with a visit to Saudi Arabia. He met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salmani, where they signed agreements on energy, defense, and mining. The president's goal is to get investments in the U.S. economy. The Crown Prince pledging $600 billion over 4 years, while President Trump wants $1 trillion.
U.S.-Saudi relationship has been a bedrock of security and prosperity. Today we reaffirm this important bond, and we take the next steps to make our relationship closer, stronger, and more powerful than ever before. It is more powerful than ever before.
The president will meet with new Syrian leader Ahmad al-Shara, and that comes a day after President Trump says he'll move to lift sanctions against that country, aiming to give the country a chance at peace. All right, we're turning back to the plane President Trump uses not only on his trips like this, but getting around in general. We're talking, of course, Air Force One. There's controversy about a possible luxury jet gifted from Qatar. The president would use that until just before his term ends if he accepts this gift. After that, giving it to the foundation overseeing his presidential library. Before we get into the constitutional questions, there are concerns the new plane simply wouldn't be on the level Air Force One is, despite being more than 30 years old, Air Force One. You see, the current fleet has anti-nuclear and anti-missile measures and sophisticated communication equipment so the president can talk to the military and give orders from anywhere in the world while he's up in the air or on the ground, for that matter. It also has air-to-air refueling capabilities, something that hasn't been used with the president on board, even an onboard medical suite. Excuse me. struggling, but I got this. And they also have an operating room. Now, then we get into the constitutional concerns that I just mentioned. The emoluments clause, which Oakland University political science chair Peter Trumbore broke down for us like this.
Intended to prevent really sort of two things. Primarily, it's bribery, right? It's to prevent any officer of the United States, including the president, from accepting foreign gifts as personal gifts while they're serving in office. And it also was to prevent any American official, including a president, from accepting any noble title, either one created here in the U.S. or conferred by a foreign power or ruler. So it goes all the way back to the very beginning. Alexander Hamilton wrote about it in the Federalist Papers in Federalist number 22.
Professor Trumbore broke down how that applies to this case last night on The Pulse. You can watch that entire episode. Just scan the QR code on the right of your screen. It'll take you right to our website or that Fox Local app. We're diving back into that Medicaid issue next on The Pulse. We're taking your questions to an expert and a closer look at the impact these cuts could have from someone who knows all too well how important Medicaid is. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Joining us now to talk about the Medicaid cuts that are on the table in the U.S. House, Macomb Defenders Rising co-founder Katrina Mineta and elder law attorney and financial planner Pat Simasco. He'll be taking your questions as well. It's good to see you both. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
Thank you for having us.
Katrina, I want to begin with you. You know firsthand how important Medicaid is and the risk of it being cut for certain groups that would be affected by this. Talk for a moment about that.
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of work within Macomb County. So every day I meet people who are on Medicaid and who need access to health care. So recently we just did a town hall with Rashida Tlaib, and we highlighted the cuts to Medicaid. I spoke with a woman named Taylor. Taylor is a mother, and she purposely adopted a child with Down syndrome. So her first question in that adoption process was, are there a risk to cuts to Medicaid? Because she knew the importance of having health care for her son. So now that health care is at risk, she's a little bit worried about how she's going to pay for ambulance costs, healthcare costs, you know, how she's going to take care of her son's speech therapy. So these are issues that are harming our communities, and our communities are really afraid right now.
And look, I'm not going to sit here and take away any of the people who have feelings out there about what they feel. If you're feeling scared because you're hearing about cuts, that's a legitimate concern. But I do want to talk a little bit about these Medicaid cuts that they're proposing right now. Are talking about increasing work requirements, right, for certain people. It's talking about, I guess, penalizing states like California and others that are giving some of these benefits to those who are here illegally. Are you concerned that it's actually going to cut from legitimate people who are working and who have children who have these issues?
Yeah, most people that are on Medicaid, they are disabled. They are the elderly, so they're past the retirement age. They are sick, severely sick. They can't work. My aunt's on Medicaid. She is mentally disabled. She's never been able to work. She will never be able to work. So this happened in Arkansas actually recently, and they instilled worker requirements, and 18,000 people were dropped off of Medicaid.
Those work requirements are obviously something that are a hallmark of this bill that, again, is going to have an upward struggle to get through the Senate, as Pat, you know, with now Josh Hawley, a very staunch Republican, a big Trump supporter who's saying, wait a minute, this is immoral, we shouldn't do this. Your office is going to be really busy for the next few weeks and months here. Are you already getting calls?
Well, yeah, we're getting calls, and we're worried about the requirements, and are they going to be cutting Medicaid as to workers that are working for Medicaid, the benefits that are going to be paid out. The funny thing is the most conservative Republican will be in my office being the most liberal person when their mom or dad's in the nursing home, and they're going to want Medicaid benefits for that person. I can turn every conservative into an immediate liberal
if their mom or their sister
if their
or
mom
their
or their
child
sister wants those benefits.
We have some viewer questions here, and I want to get to these here right now. We'll begin. We always say the show is about you, and we really mean it when we say that. We ask you, hey, do you have a question that you'd like our experts to answer? And right now, Lisa, you're on the Pulse asking us the first question. Thank you so much for writing in here today. You say 100% of Democrats didn't vote for it. It's time for the states to step up. My question is, are life-saving benefits for seniors and disabled being cut? Does it also include for hunger-fighting measures and shelters? I don't know if you can answer all of it, but what part of it you can, please let us know what you think.
It's going to be across. I don't know that they're going to cut any specific benefit. They're just going to cut funding across the board, so everybody's going to have to take a hit. Either the facilities aren't going to get paid as much as they should be getting paid, or the people that are trying to get the benefit, it's going to be harder for them to get it.
We know that, Katrina, there's even talk of reform for SNAP programs, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and they're saying, hey, how do we figure out how to reform this? When you use the words reform, you're obviously talking about looking for cost savings there. That concerns you as well.
Yeah, I mean, reforms is, well, they have to sell this bill, okay? They have to sell something that's going to harm constituents. So they're going to say whatever they need to say in order to salvage this and make it palatable for the American people. I agree that reforms need to be done, but it's not reforms when you're going to sacrifice healthcare for millions of Americans. This is going to impact 13 million Americans in the country.
The trouble is which Americans, because 10,000 people a day are turning 65. So the people are living much longer. There's going to be needing the Medicaid benefits for the long-term care, which means they're going to have to pull it from some other place or increase taxes or provide other type of benefits or focus on other measures that they're not focusing on.
I find it fascinating when you talked about Republicans, the most staunch Republicans who come to your office who quickly become, they feel differently when it's their relative.
Oh, absolutely.
You wonder what Josh Hawley, this lawmaker, who's, I mean, he is literally one of the most ardent Republicans that you'll ever find. And he's writing to the New York Times, one of the most liberal or print magazines, saying, hey, man, it's immoral. Are you hopeful that this will be an uphill battle and that we can at least preserve what we have right now?
I think they need to look at things at how to cut the Medicaid budget. A third of us will be in a nursing home. Nobody has nursing home insurance. What can we do to help focus on getting people with more long-term care insurance? If it's not long-term care insurance, focus on getting people out of nursing homes into the home. They say it's a third less dollars to keep someone at home, and they won't pay for home benefits. They have to go into the nursing home. What's up?
Listen, there are so many people who are concerned about this. And yes, you're right. There are cuts that need to be made. You can look at your household budget and say, we got to figure out where to trim. So obviously this country needs to trim. On whose backs is the question that we're all asking. I want to get to our next question here. Yeah. Stephanie asking the question here on the Pulse. Thank you for your question. I'm wondering about protections for children's special health care. I know Katrina kind of touched on this. I'm worried about seniors in nursing homes. You just touched on that, as it is covered by Medicaid, not Medicare. I fear for people with mental health crises. Anything here touch a nerve with those that you know and you've talked to? Katrina, we'll begin with you.
Sure. I mean, nursing homes, like we just talked about, 60% of Americans are in nursing homes are at risk here. So the fact of the matter is these are human beings. Human beings deserve health care. And if they don't, I mean, what are people going to do if they can't get their prescriptions? Right? And the problem is that the eligibility requirements right now are tough, because I'm meeting a lot of people who are on health care and they are just above the requirement, so they're not making enough money, but they are not enough to get on Medicaid.
I think it's interesting you mentioned prescriptions. I had Lori Goldman, who's with a group called Femmes for Dems, clearly, you know, someone who's more liberal leaning, and she actually said on the show right where you're sitting yesterday, hey, if this executive order by President Trump to lower prescription drugs by upwards of 60 to 80% goes through, I'm all on board, and I'll be waving the flag. You'd be happy about that too, I would imagine, yes?
I think so.
You hope that it would go through and that it would work?
I would hope so.
Yeah. Pat?
Yeah.
That would take a huge weight off the backs of many people, right?
Correct.
That's an interesting one that we'll have to watch. Richard's asking a question here on the Pulse to both of you as well. Sure. Richard, thanks for your question here. You're asking this. Let's get to the question if we could. It's coming up. There it is. So you get Medicaid and Obamacare. Why do you need two health coverages? What is not being mentioned? There is something in the story. Does he plan on cutting one and put more funding in the other? I don't know that everyone knows exactly what's going on, how to frame this.
So, okay, Medicare is hospital insurance, and it pays for 90 up to 100 days of rehab. Medicaid is nursing home insurance that pays long-term care. It'll pay forever. The issue is, if you have to focus on what can you do with both of those. What happens if you made Medicaid get paid through Medicare and provide nursing homes through Medicare. You might have to increase the Medicare premium, but then it's going to it'll spread that payment throughout everybody in the whole United States.
Sure.
You can spread it around to everybody. Who's going to vote for that? Very few people, because that means their Medicare is going up.
And no one wants that.
No,
Katrina, I'll give you the last word here on this broadcast for this segment. Your hope about what happens with the bill and what people can do in terms of talking to their lawmakers, whoever they may be.
So right now, the best thing that you can do is pick up the phone and call your lawmaker. We only need 2 to 3 Republicans, maybe 4, to make sure this bill does not pass. So if you just Google, find my representative, all you have to do is put in your zip code, call them, and say, please vote no on the Medicaid cuts. That's what we need people to do. And I want to say one last thing.
Sure.
The Medicaid cuts do not have to happen. The reason they're doing this is to fund tax cuts for the billionaires. That's the only reason that this is happening. And in this country, we need to value humanity over tax cuts for billionaires.
And listen, the tax cuts that they're talking about putting the old tax bracket back. Right now, it's I think at 37%, and if the tax cuts expire for those very wealthy, it would go up to 39.6. Your argument, and so many people's argument, is they can pick up the tab on that, so we don't have to hurt people who have the least. It is an important topic, one that we will not stop talking about, and we're going to follow it every step of the way. Katrina, Pat, thanks for your time here on The Pulse. We appreciate it. We're turning to the massive 2 years on tap for Michigan politics, the race for Detroit mayor, the gubernatorial election. We're diving into that and more. You are watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show, The Pulse. Joining us now to dive into all things Michigan politics, Sam Robinson with Detroit 1 Million and Malachi Barrett with Bridge Detroit, 2 journalists who have been writing about Michigan and the city of Detroit for so long. And so we love to have you guys on. You guys always do a terrific job. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so right away, look, there's so many races. We have like 6 races all going on in the next 2 years, right? What stands out to you as the most consequential in terms of interest that people have in these Michigan and Detroit races?
Well, hey, we're in Detroit, so I'm going to say Detroit mayoral election is, I think it has implications for the state as a whole, too. Not to, get over our skis a little bit, but, we're here in the largest city in the state. We're in a city that's going, through some pretty massive changes, trying to attract new businesses here. There's a lot of development happening. I think it's going to be key for the state's overall growth strategy long term. Obviously, we've got a big gubernatorial race next year, but hey, if you're at home, Detroit mayoral is where it's at this year. That's the most important race.
Sam, if you're in D.C., you probably are looking at our Senate contestants here. We had a 4th Democratic candidate for Senate in Joe Tate come out. We got Abdul Al-Sayed. We got Haley Stevens and Mallory McMurrow. Everybody in D.C. is kind of like, hey, could the Michigan Senate race kind of shape the direction that Democrats nationally take?
And it could, because if you're look at what we're talking about today about Medicaid, you're talking about one person, one lawmaker who can help flip the trajectory of a bill, and that's where we're at right now. And so all eyes are on Michigan. Is there a reason that President Trump realizes the importance of Michigan so much? Is it because of some of these other races, do you think, understanding that if he has a good standing here, then perhaps he can have some influence here?
Yeah, I think it continues to reinforce the idea that Michigan is a battleground state. We're losing some political relevance as we lose population because we have fewer congressional representation. But, in a Congress that has really tight margins, especially in the Senate, these races are extremely important, and they're winnable races for either party. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of focus.
I want to get to Governor Whitmer here and setting the tone for the Democratic Party for a second. This Democratic Party, everyone talks about the Republican Party being fractured, and I will argue, and with anybody who wants to, about the fact that both parties are fractured.
They certainly are.
The Democratic Party, I mean, Governor Whitmer goes to the White House, hangs out with the president from February till now 3 times, and literally takes a lashing by local Democrats in this state. A lot of people weren't happy with the fact that she's, I guess, warming up to Trump.
Rube, when she goes and she doesn't say anything to the degree of, hey, your tariffs are going to kill our auto jobs. Hey, you can't cut Medicaid. Hey, you can't disappear people. A lot of people feel like, what do we vote for you for? She feels like, we got to get the wins where we can take them. Certainly, Selfridge Air Base is adding thousands of jobs. We're getting those new big and bad fighter jets. I don't know what those are going to do for people struggling to buy groceries, but that is a win.
But it supports Harrison Township, the economy in Macomb County, and the military might that does have an economic impact. It gives us an opportunity to continue to thrive in this area.
You could imagine how Democrats who are anti-war, could really.
Can we talk about the propaganda value just really quickly of those visits for the Trump administration? Regardless of the conversation of why she was there and what she's able to deliver for the state, the photos of her embracing Trump, the photo of her with the folder in front of her face, trying to separate herself from an event, and the way Trump has been able to kind of force Whitmer into these events that she hasn't necessarily understood that she was going to be in the room for. What was happening in the Oval Office in the White House that day? Same thing in Selfridge. She was kind of dragged on stage for a second. Those are really big wins for the Trump administration on social media. It's playing out in a different way, I think, than the conversations of Democratic lawmakers.
And it's so fascinating when you watch how Governor Whitmer interacts with President Trump. I think at Selfridge was a really telling moment. She turned around to look at the president and say, I'm really appreciative of this, what has happened here. Not of you, but of the fact that this is happening at Selfridge. The political calculus for all of this has to state the overarching story here is this. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party have to find themselves. In the state of Michigan, where will you find that be the most symptomatic? Or do they have to find, is it the Senate race?
I think it will be the Senate race because that's a statewide race. You know, same for gubernatorial. I think those have major implications for how the party nationally is seeing what works and what doesn't in these battleground states. But it happens, I think it's across the board. They're going to have to figure out what a winning message is and what they're really about.
The Senate race is so important, and so we mentioned, of course, Mike Rogers, who only lost by a fraction to Slotkin earlier. He's obviously in the race as well. Your thoughts, Sam, on the viability of President Trump being in office and him having a successful Senate race because he has an ally in the White House?
Well, I mean, we've seen Mike Rogers just hired Chris LaCivita. Chris's daughter was actually the director of communications for the Trump campaign in Michigan. Chris is the senior advisor to Trump's successful 2024 national campaign. So, you know, that's a pretty good sign and a bad sign if you're Tudor Dixon or any other Republican looking at that Senate race. You know, this is his third time trying to get in Congress in this way. So we'll see. You know, Mike Rogers is somebody that we all have seen on a ballot before. But again, Republicans have not won in that Senate race since, what, 1992?
Yeah, it's been like my whole lifetime, basically.
We don't even know the name of the guy that was the last Republican senator of Michigan.
But we got to say, Mike Rogers came awfully close the last time around, and the credit goes to Slotkin's team, who was able to, during a Trump victory in the state, promote Slotkin into that spot.
It's hard to compare these elections. I mean, we're going to have it's an off election year.
Yeah, sure.
You know, Rogers may have been buoyed by support for Trump that might reverse by the time it comes to vote.
Voter interest, finally, for both of you, and we only have a few seconds left, but how important is it to activate the vote at a time that perhaps there's no presidential election to kind of get people to the polls?
You know, early on we were told by some of the campaigns, you know, hey, early voting in Detroit for the first time, the race really starts on June 22nd when absentee ballots go out, but now we're hearing, you know, we're expecting it might be a 70,000 turnout in that primary. That's compared to the other elections, not too much.
It's like 19%. People expect this will be down, especially compared to, you know, national election years. But I think there's a lot of Detroiters that are eager to learn more about the candidates. I'm hearing a lot of people who are interested in voting, but it's a challenge for sure.
The bottom line is the majority of people in the great city of Detroit don't elect a mayor because the majority of people aren't going out and voting, and that needs to change.
That is right.
To get the representation that's out there.
That's what we're trying to do.
Well, you're doing it. Sam Robinson, Malachi Barrett, good to see you both. We always love having you on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth.
That is the Pulse for tonight. Thank you, as always, for joining us. I'm Ruth Raj. We'll see you tomorrow night.